Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. Screen share time. All right, Christy, take it away.
Hi, guys. Man, this has been a minute since I've taught a class. I was telling everybody this morning, I used to teach all of them, and now we let everybody else do it. So I lost my group just a little bit. So if I start talking crazy, well, we already consider the source. How about that? How about that? So my name is Christy Kutka. I've been with Chicago Title for 31 years. I started when I was 12. I am the nerd that could talk about title and escrow all day, every day. I don't know if anybody would really want to listen to me if I did do that, but I mean, I'm here for it. I can do that. So I have been tasked with talking about the ABCs of liens. And so, as an escrow holder, our job is to make sure that title is free and clear. And so this is just some basic stuff that we're going to go through on our end. So our agenda today is we're going to cover how your prelim is going to guide your key liens, how the statement of information affects your transaction, how liens can affect your transaction timelines, solar liens, what liens you can discover upfront, and then we're going to answer any questions that you might have at the end. So, and if you have something, just put it in the chat and Jen will tell me all about it and we'll throw on some breaks and stuff like that. So what is a lien? The definition, here we go, is a charge upon real or personal property for the satisfaction of some debt or a duty ordinarily arising by operation of law. The bank had a lien on our house. Now, this word lien is like kind of spooky for a lot of people, but the reality is that most people have a lien against them, and that is when they are in debt for their property. They own it, but there's still a debt on it. So the number 2 here, is there a number 2 on this one still, Jen? Yep. The security interest created by a mortgage, the lien of a mortgage. There we go. A lien is typically filed against the real property. So anytime we record something, there we go. It's filed against the property. Okay. So pretty easy on that one. So my new favorite tool that we have with Chicago Title is called Start in Here. And when I tell you it has changed the way I do escrow for the better, that is an understatement. A lot of times there are things that can slip through the crack. This Start in Here thing, we send it out to both the buyer and seller. The reason why we're asking nowadays for an email address and a cell phone number for our customers is because we send them an email with a link where they log in, and this login is good for the whole duration of their transaction. Because if they have to sign documents or anything like that, it'll be through the Start in Here portal. But we ask them some very basic questions about what's going on with their transaction. We get some very personal information. It is a direct link from that email straight into their file. It doesn't go through all the bells and whistles. It just goes into the file. So I'm not going to get an email with their information that people can get into or anything like that. It just goes straight into the file. And so it allows me to have a secure website with our people. And it's amazing, because where we used to have, there was this lag time for, just because of human nature, we don't have that lag time anymore. And so it's kind of nice, because on day 2, I can go in and, if I need information, I can go in and I can order the payoffs immediately. So we know what we're up against. So everything's kind of at our fingertips if they fill out the document the correct way. So a lot of people are still emailing me and saying, hey, is this really you? And it really is me that's sending, well, me adjacent. How about that? There's a minion who is sending out this information on my behalf. So, and it's a game changer. Please, please, please encourage your people to do it. And we do want both buyers, or whoever's on title, we want everybody to go through this, because there's some basic information about the file, about wire fraud, all that kind of good stuff. So do it. So the next thing is, let's talk about what a judgment is. So it's a formal decision given by the court. It's an obligation such as a debt created by the decree of a court, a certificate evidencing such decree. A judgment is typically filed against the people or business involved. Judgments become liens for the purpose of a real estate transaction. So when we have, the things that there are judgments that can affect our closing, right? So the preliminary report contains relevant information, so the parties to the transaction will become aware of the matters which will not be insured against by the title company. So the prelim, when we look at it, it has exceptions and liens and encumbrances and risks that will not, be insured by the title, with title policy when it comes out. And then other requirements and provisions which are reflected as notes in the preliminary report, which will be removed if and when the title policy is issued. So that's, at the end of the day, this is what we're doing, right? We're getting this preliminary report, and within 6 weeks of us closing, the new buyer is obtaining this title policy. That's what we're issuing. We're issuing clear title. So, it's this preliminary title report. Okay. And I think that a lot of us go, oh, we don't connect the two, which in actuality, they're directly connected. And then the statement of identity is we're using to clear any liens that might be against the property. So let's talk about what this preliminary title report looks like. So when you look at our prelim here, we have some basic stuff here. We have our title officer, we have the escrow officer, we have the address of the property, the effective date. The effective date is the date that the title plant is up to. Okay, so we cannot run, there's a little bit of a lag time in between the effective date of the plant and the date that the preliminary report comes out. Okay, so we always have to keep those things in mind, because you would think that if a lien or anything recorded, we would have it from the day that it, escrow opened, when in actuality, we have it from the plant date. So from there, we're going to go down here to item number 2. It's who owns the property. Now, when it comes down to all these things here, you would be surprised. We have, in my career, how many times I have gotten a purchase agreement, and that name that's where it's vested and who signed the contract are 2 totally different people. And I'm going like this, how do we miss this part? So there are a couple of options when we're talking about these things, right? So you want to make sure that you have all of your information in advance. You can either call customer service. Gail is amazing, and she knows exactly what she's doing. She can get you a vesting deed. A lot of people take the vesting from the tax records, when in actuality, they only have a certain amount of space, for one, and they could be missing somebody. So this whole vesting thing, you don't want to get a contract and you haven't had the right people sign, or you've missed someone, because everyone has to sign that purchase agreement, or we don't have a valid contract. Number 3 here is the legal description. That's how we find it. Okay, we ensure the legal description, not necessarily the address. The APN is a fast way of finding it, but it's the legal description that we are really ensuring for. Okay, so let's go to our next page. So this is where we start getting into the nitty-gritty of our transaction here, our preliminary report. So the prelim has taxes that are showing on here. In this case, right now where we sit, we started the first installment of the 2023-2024 tax year on July 1st. We know that they're out there. We do not know how much they are until November 1st, because our tax collector will not release any bills any sooner than the 1st of November. But we know that they're out there. And so right now what we're going to do is we're going to acknowledge that they're there, but we don't know what we don't know. Okay. So those are out there. We're going to prorate based off of the existing lien that was for the 2022-2023 tax year. That's how we're going to prorate taxes. Until we get the bill, we don't know what it is. So number 2 here, this is explaining that the taxes haven't been paid yet. So if it were this case right here, and we were talking about like last year's tax bills, okay, we would confirm, because 2 and 3 can kind of go hand in hand, okay, because 2 and 3 are 2 is saying, hey, they didn't pay last year's taxes. 3 is saying that there's a default. So really, when it comes down to it, a lot of times it's not 2 separate bills per se. They're just acknowledging that that's what the taxes, those were what the taxes were last year that were not paid, but now they're defaulted and we're going to pay whatever is available on number 3. We do confirm with the tax collector, you know, how much those bills are and all that kind of jazz. So number 4, supplemental taxes. So basically everybody gets a supplemental tax. A lot of people do not understand this process. If we were to close right now on September 8th, the tax bill that comes out in November, it is not going to go to the new buyer. Okay, let that sit for just a second. You would have to close escrow on before March 1st in order for that tax bill to go to the new buyer. What would happen is from where we sit right now, the tax bill, when it comes out in November, it is not going to be reflective of this change of ownership. So what happens is the tax collector still wants their money. They call it a supplemental tax bill. It goes directly to the new homeowner when it becomes available. I used to say 6 to 8 months, but then you would be getting calls later on, like a year later. Oh, we closed escrow a year ago and the tax collector just sent us this bill. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how far back they are. But in actuality, you know, here we are. So with that being said, a supplemental bill is going to come to the customer. It just depends on where we are. So November, this tax bill is not going to be reflective of this change, but probably the next year it will be reflective of this change. So what will happen is the tax collector is going to collect money from September 8th all the way until July 1st of next year. Okay, they're going to give them, it'll come one statement, but it'll be broken down into 2 parts. So everybody needs to understand how that works. Supplemental bills, that's a whole nother story. We can talk about that at another time as far as like how to get those things paid, but they go directly to the homeowner. And a lot of people do not realize that when those tax bills go straight to the homeowner, they have to pay it. It doesn't automatically get paid by their impound account. So, and then when we're dealing with cash deals too, it's a whole nother thing, because, you know, they're not going to get, like, the tax bill won't go to the new homeowner. So we got to talk about taxes, that the buyer is still responsible for the taxes in November. They have gotten, if we close today, we'd be giving them a credit from July 1st to the close of escrow. So they would be made whole when the taxes come out of them. So whole nother story, but it's out there. Number 5, Melrose, typically paid for within the taxes. We can get this bill, you know, all kinds of different ways. We can get you a copy of the bill itself so you can see how much it's broken down and all that kind of stuff. Number 6, CC&Rs. Okay, very standard stuff. Basic, stays with the property. Easements stay with the property. Now let's talk about number 9, which is our deed of trust. When you look at this preliminary report, it is not like a credit report. $225,000 is how much they borrowed in 2012. They've been making payments all along. So that means that amount is not how much they owe. That's how much they borrowed initially. So once we get the statement, then we know, what's going on. Again, that start in here thing helps us expedite that process of getting the payoff in faster. Number 10. Okay. What my least favorite thing on the planet, and yours too, solar. So solar makes me a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, because we're all still, to this day, we're still trying to get our groove, whose responsibility is what when it comes down to solar. So the way when I get this preliminary report in, I immediately reach out to my selling agent and my listing agent, my selling agent, and I say, hey, look, there's solar out here. We got to talk about this. What are we doing with this stuff? Sometimes we're transferring it, sometimes we're paying it off, all that kind of good stuff, right? So we're gonna go down that road in just a second too. So our next little slide here, maybe. So mortgage, we need a demand from the lender. If we cannot reach a beneficiary for a demand, then we need a loss document. So demands come in a couple different ways. One is if it's an institutional lender, we go straight to them. If it is a individual, we go straight to them. Back in the day, we're going to go old school for just a moment here. Back in the day, they used to, when a loan got paid off, they would get this document called a reconveyance. It's what we use to show that there are no loans of record. And they would send it to the customer and say, hey, you need to go and record this on your behalf to clear title. A lot of people did not, even though the letter said go record this, they were like, yay. And they would have I can remember hearing my grandmother say, we're going to burn our note and deed of trust, burn the proof that it's been paid in full. It's like, now if somebody told me that, my heart would explode from stress. Don't do that. We need proof that something's been done. So, this reconveyance thing is no joke, especially, if we're going to go old school. I have one right now where it had 2 deeds of trust, from back in the day, and we were able to find the reconveyances, but had we not been able to find these releases because they were of a certain amount, we would have had to have gone and go get this lost document bond. And that it's about a 45-day process. They want additional funds. It's like a bond, basically saying that it's been taken care of. It is quite a hassle. So the reconveyances the demands have to come from whoever they borrowed the money from. So it gets messy with these when it's a private beneficiary and all that kind of good stuff, and they're dead, and that's when we have to go to the lost document bond, or they don't have the documentation. A lot of people don't realize that even if you borrow money from a private individual, there is a process of getting the reconveyance issued and recorded and all that kind of stuff. At Chicago Title, we do have a reconveyance department that assists us and stuff like that when it comes down to stuff. So, and the reconveyance has to be done through escrow, because again, what is our job? Our job is to clear title. So, notes. This is just some basic information from, and it's in the back of our preliminary report. It just kind of gives you some ideas of what goes on through escrow. It'll tell you if there's been any conveyances, any change of title in the last 24 months. It'll tell you who the buyer is. It'll talk about, good funds, all this kind of good stuff. So it's a good thing in the sense that it kind of gives you an overview of what we can and can't do. So let's talk about a statement of information. We're going to go old school once again. In the olden days, we would just kind of list out like the liens that we thought were available or out there and stuff like that. Now we say, hey, instead of listing out what might be out there, we're going to just blanket it and we're going to ask for this statement of information. We're differentiating Bob Smith from Bob Smith, from a Robert Smith, from a Robert Lee Smith. So what we have to do in order to do that is to clear title, we have to get the last four of somebody's social and their date of birth. We send it over to our statement of information department and they check and see if there's any liens against the people that we're talking about here, our sellers and sometimes our buyers. So we'll deal with the buyers in a second. But the sellers, what we're looking for is anything that's been recorded against them. We're looking for federal tax lien, bankruptcy, judgments, child support. We might need them to bring additional information into escrow. So this whole statement of information thing, again, with the start in here process, we get that information through the start in here portal. And it again has changed how we do things. We can get statement of information back very quickly nowadays. So this week I opened up one on Monday. I found out that a previous owner, we needed a statement of information. We got it turned over immediately. We understood that he had child support. We have already ordered the child support. I got a notification this morning saying that they're not going to request any money from child support, but it went so much faster than it used to. Okay. So buyers, we used to run buyers' names. Now we're not as concerned about it, but what we're looking for on the buyer side are federal tax liens and bankruptcies. Okay. The other stuff, we just slap it onto title and people just need to understand that they're going to have to pay that debt sooner or later. What a lot of people don't realize also is we're not really running buyer and seller's names. But their spouses might, if they have liens against them, like the people that have to deed off title, at some point their debt is going to have to be taken care of too, because California's a community property state, and their debt is their spouse's debt, and it's just kind of a mess. So, satisfying removing federal and state tax liens. So, state tax liens are a lot faster as far as payoffs go. Federal tax liens are 30 calendar days, okay? And it is quite the pain in the butt. So when we start talking about these things, sometimes people have already gone and negotiated amounts from the state. We cannot take those amounts from the customer directly. We have to take them directly from the entity, meaning from the state or from the IRS. So what we can do, these are the options that are available to the seller. We just order a payoff. They say, I don't want to deal with it. You order it, you deal with it. Or we're going to hold off from ordering it, and the seller is going to contact the tax authority and negotiate a smaller amount. And once it's agreed upon, then we step in and then we order the payoff. The third option, escrow holds off ordering and the seller contacts the authority, negotiates the tax amount, and then they can also they can give us a release. We don't have to pay anything, so that's kind of nice. And then for the buyers, we just order a payoff. A lot of lenders, it's not uncommon to this day where we don't necessarily care about a lien or something's been recorded against a buyer, but it's part of the process of qualifying for their loan. And so it is not uncommon for us to still have to go in there and order payoffs or something for a judgment or a lien or family support, because it's the lender wants to make sure that they're capable of repaying this loan. And, this debt thing can be an issue. So BKs, bankruptcy. Ugh. So this affects our transaction. So with the seller, we got to make sure that the bankruptcy is closed. Okay. And if it isn't closed, the courts have to authorize the sale of this transaction. We can't just go in there without, authorization. So the courts have to step in. And then with the buyer, we just have to make sure that the bankruptcy is closed also. Child support. So let's talk about child support. So just like what I had happen this week, just because somebody pays child support doesn't mean that they owe money on their child support. Okay, we have to get a release. So you could have a lien recorded against you, but be completely current on your bill. You can have a lien recorded against you and not be completely current on your bill also. So I recently seen a bill come through for $25,000. It really does put a kink in your closing of your transaction. The buyer or whoever is affected, they can go down and see if they will be willing to work with them as far as a payment plan and all that kind of good stuff. But no matter how you look at it, we have to have a release. So child support has to be paid for by the seller. If they have a lien, buyer, not so much. Buyer, we're just going to slap it on there, but in time, they're going to have to pay it. They're going to have to pay it when they either sell their property or they do a refinance. Okay, so it's out there. No matter how you look at it, it's called clearing title. Other liens and judgments. So abstract judgments we have to deal with. And that's through the courts. If you have a judgment against you. Mechanics liens, meaning there's been work done to the property and it has to be paid through escrow. And then the lovely Liz pendants, where somebody has slapped a recorded document against our property, basically saying that it is currently being affected by a lawsuit, and therefore we can't close until we get a release in part of that transaction. So let's go back for just 2 seconds when we talk about these liens and stuff like that. Remember we were talking about the effective date on our file. Again, it's good up until the plant date. Now, there are things that can transpire, and I've seen plenty of times, because I've been around the block a couple times, right? That from the day that we get that preliminary report to the day that we're ready to close escrow, something has happened. An abstract or judgment, a mechanics lien, a Liz pendants. Before we close escrow, we're going to rerun our preliminary report to make sure that there's nothing else that is recorded against our property. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it just happens, and there's nothing we can do about it except for go back and see what we can do about getting a release. So, or a demand, if an abstract is recorded, we have to get a demand, and we got to get it, and the demand will say, once you pay this amount, we're going to give you a release. Mechanics liens, if there's a mechanics liens, we're going to go find out who recorded it, get a demand from them, and get the release so we can record it through our transaction, saying that, well, once we pay them, we can clear title. Liz pendants, same thing. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that there's still that window in there that things can happen. And the preliminary report is good only as of that date. A lot of times the lenders will ask us to update the preliminary reports, but they're good. I think they like them for 90 days. So there you go. Okay, so let's talk about solar. I hate solar. I know you guys are making probably the same face. I can't see your faces, but I'm sure you're making the same faces than I am. So solar, we start dealing with all this crummy stuff. I just still keep on thinking in the back of my mind, there's got to be a better way of doing this, but clearly somebody has not thought about this, and they like to watch us all get stressed out about this stuff. So what I will tell you as far as solar goes is get on it immediately, immediately. Make your seller call in and tell them that, they have a transaction. Make sure that buyer calls in right away, you know, and gives them their information so we can start this process. Because once everybody's done what they're supposed to do, that's when I go in and I get my papers that I need. So let's talk about how solar affects our escrow. When you lease or purchase a solar system for your home, the lien recorded against the property may have a financing statement, we call it a UCC, and or a solar contract, which we call a PUC. These are considered title items and must be addressed through escrow. No two solar companies have the same standards and procedures. Trust me, that's truth. All companies asked to work directly with the parties, and once initiated by both parties, we can facilitate and get the releases to be issued to our office to record concurrently. Fees vary, prorations, aspects of the transaction. Okay. So recently we had something where we had two separate units. One was purchased with the house, one was purchased later on, and it was a complete disaster. And then we had somebody who had passed away. So we were trying to get death certificates in there. I mean, and the worst part about it was there was absolutely nothing I could do. Like, the solar company was saying, well, we haven't talked to the buyer. The buyer's like, we've called in like twice. It's just a mess. And unfortunately, until the buyer and seller do exactly what the solar company needs to have happen, I can't get any releases, and I can't really do anything about it either. I kind of sit back, and the only thing I can do is feel sorry for everybody that they have to go through this mess in the first place. But other than that, that's all I got. Let's talk about the factors to consider when we're transferring or leasing leased solar in an escrow. So the solar system is affixed to the house, but it is not part of the house, okay? You'll need to know the payment amount so that the buyer can be approved both by the solar company and their lender. Typically, the buyer will need to have a credit check run by the solar company, and they will want to stay in close communication with the lender on this, okay? So this is leased, okay? So let's talk about the factors to consider when there is owned solar. If the solar is free and clear, there will not be anything on the preliminary report. So people can say, Chris, there's solar. Okay, but is it paid for? Yeah. Okay, it's not going to show on the prelim. I don't know anything about it. If the solar is owned, it is considered personal property also. It's like a gazebo or a shed. I mean, it can technically be moved, but it's traditionally attached. Everyone just considers it part of the house, right? If money still owed to the solar company, we'll see a financing statement, that UCC. The buyer will either assume the loan, or one of the parties must pay the loan in full prior to the close of escrow. Okay. So, if you're a buyer purchasing a house and it's owned and it's fully paid off, God bless you. You've won the lottery, basically. All power agreement transfers are handled outside of escrow. We don't have anything to do with it. All that stuff's all dialed in, like the warranties and all that kind of stuff are all outside of escrow. Okay. Oh gosh, it just kind of goes from bad to worse, right? Now we're going to talk about Hero and Pace and Y-Green. Yeah. So, you know, this is the worst, and you've got to watch for it really carefully. A lot of people don't realize, especially the elderly people, they go, oh yeah, I own my solar. Well, they took out like that PACE loan, right? And now they still have to pay for it, and there's a problem. So the financing a lot of times it's energy efficient items. So when we start talking about solar or a new roof or water or windows, that kind of stuff, they can do all this through the Hero Pay stuff. So, but the payments are collected through the property taxes. Okay, so a lot of times we see the taxes are outrageous, but once you pull the tax bill, you'll find out that it's all of this plus the amount for the energy efficient items. So when we prorate taxes, we take out the large amount for the Hero and the PACE, and we prorate based on the real tax bill. the remaining balance of the hero has to be paid through escrow. We can't transfer it to the new buyer. It can't, there's no assumptions. They can't take it over. And it also happens they want it paid when they go and refinance too, which really does stink. And a lot of people they don't realize that how these things get repaid. So Hero requires I think it's like $50, I think, in advance to get a demand from them. The demand is good for 30 days. Once it expires, the fee has to be paid again, and we have to get another demand for that matter. So every time taxes get paid, there's a chunk of this bill that gets paid off. So let's look at what it would look like on a preliminary report. So on the preliminary report, we have a really cool thing now. Our preliminary report is it's called Live Look, and you can click on links and it'll pull up the document so you can see exactly what it looks like. So 13 is basically where what we normally see on a preliminary report, showing something is out there when it comes down to PACE or Hero or whatever. So what it says in here is that there is an amount that they pay every time they pay their taxes, and that is $1,667.33. Okay, so that is on top of the actual tax bill. The reason why people are like, oh, it's so great, you get to write off your taxes, but I mean, a lot of times you end up paying 10 times more for the equipment because you're paying it through this PACE thing. So it's not a deal. It's not a deal. Trust me. So, and I just feel bad for the little old people, because they're like, we're going to sell our house and we're going to go move into this retirement facility and we're going to live off the money that we're getting from our property. And then they realize, oh crap, I got to pay off my solar that I'm not going to be, using anymore either. So just a mess. So when you start clicking on links, it'll show the actual document that's been reported against the property. So this is the contract that the customers have agreed to when it comes down to paying back the loan. So we have the contract here, and then the next slide has the breakdown of how much money it comes down. So we have, how much interest. Look at the interest line. Really? So that's how they come up with the amount. So it'll show, how much they're paying. So the $1,667.33, that's for 1 year. So it's broken down 50-50, right? For the tax bill for when they pay their taxes. So it's pretty much a stinking mess. So I'm going to tell you a little secret. If I were you, which I am not you, I would, when I'm taking this listing and something isn't right, and you know what I'm talking about, the customer has something funny going on. I'm going to sell my house so I can pay off my tax lien. Something just isn't right. I have quite a few customers who come over and say, hey, Christy, can you pre-open this preliminary report for me so I can understand what's going on? Just recently, I have had 2 files where I'm really grateful that we did the pre-open, because dad has passed away, son is now stepping in as the successor trustee, and there are judgments, defaulted taxes, there's a federal tax lien, there's all kinds of stuff that he's having to negotiate on behalf of his deceased father. I had one recently where, the property has to go through probate. They were not aware that there was part of the property that needed to go through probate because somebody had passed away, but they weren't in a trust, and so just understand what your gut feels like. If something doesn't feel right, please, get a pre-open. I've had ones where, again, the person who was selling it or signed the contract is the person who is entitled. So when something doesn't feel right, let's talk about this, because it's better to address these items before we have a buyer who has a rate lock that's expiring than the other way around. So what kind of questions do you guys have? I know I could talk forever about this stuff. So is there anything out there, Jen, that I'm
There are no questions in the chat. So at this point, if you have a question, you're welcome to unmute and just ask your question directly to Christy.
I could not be that good of a teacher, guys. Please, come on. There's got to be something that I did not cover.
Hi, Christy. I have a question.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys, I had never run into this issue before, but we had a client who closed about, I want to say maybe like 5 years ago on their purchase, and the city went up to them and told them that the measurements of the property were not correct. So I don't know. We looked at his prelim exhibit A, showing the measurements that recorded with the deed, and they were correct as how he had them, but the city was telling him otherwise. So I don't know what would we be able to do in that case.
So when you say the measurements, because we go, we don't deal so much. We do like lot and track and all that kind of stuff. When it comes down to the measurements, they're traditionally on the maps.
Right. Uh-huh.
So are they saying the map was incorrect?
The city is saying that the measurements were changed, I guess, like 2 or 3 years after they purchased the property. So that's why I just thought that has to be wrong.
I mean, if it was after the fact, I'm wondering if there was a lot line or somebody did something to adjust what the map. Once it closes like that and there's things that go on, that's, the bottom line is you can always come back to the title company and say, okay, what is there something that was missed on our end? Sometimes there's just things that are done that we have no control over, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So,
I was just wondering, like, what can we do in that case to help the client? But
I would definitely go if they're saying a couple years after the fact. I'd be like, okay, because you can always, when it comes down to like measurements and stuff like that, sometimes you have to have somebody come out and actually go and like measure, like show you where the corners are and stuff like that.
Right.
I'm just curious what would have happened. You're more than welcome to give me a call. My contact information's up there, and I would be more than glad to look into it and see what the heck what really went down.
Okay. Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, we could definitely look at the property from a title perspective with Christy working with customer service to see if we see anything new that was recorded on the property after they, took title, as far as a change to the map or anything like that, and go from there.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Hi, Christy. I have a question. Can you go over in more detail exactly what supplemental taxes are?
Yeah.
I have a client who closed, or I sold her a property last year, March, April.
Yep.
And she texted me about 3 weeks ago saying, "Hey, Iris, I got this notice of supplemental assessment. I don't know what it is. Is this a bill? This taxes didn't get paid through escrow?" And she's like, "I thought my taxes were getting paid with my, monthly mortgage in and all that." So I want to have like a good response in case somebody else asks me this question.
So let's kind of go back to supplemental taxes. This is, a lot of people just don't get this part, right? So what will happen is everybody gets a supplemental tax bill. They get sent directly to the new homeowner. It is not sent to the lender for their impounds. Okay, it does not. I'm not saying that the lender can't pay it, but the buyer has to go down this road, right, of asking the lender, can you pay them? Do I have enough money in my impound account to pay these taxes? So what happens is, if the supplemental, and again, it depends on when we're closing escrow, right? So sometimes they get assessed depending on when we close escrow. Sometimes they can have 2 bills, sometimes they have 1 bill. It just depends on how this whole process works, right? Or when we're closing escrow. So the way I explain it to my buyers is, we know what the tax rate is. We know what the sales price is. You need to be saving for this unknown number that's going to come from the assessor's office. So hypothetically speaking, if we closed today, September 8th, okay, I would know that the taxes that come out in November are not going to reflect our change. Okay, so it's not going to happen until next November. I would make sure that I would take the sales price and multiply it by the amount, the tax rate, right? Then I would know what the yearly amount of the taxes are. I would take into consideration that especially when we're dealing with impounds and stuff like that, that the lender is probably collecting more than enough money for the taxes that are going to come out in next November. But we have some wiggle room when it comes down to this kind of stuff. So if the buyer wants the lender to pay for the supplementals, they have to call into customer service. I have the supplemental tax bill. Can you pay it? Yes, you can. We can pay it. We have enough money. Okay. How do I get this bill to you? They send it in to the lender. They need to call back and make sure that the lender has received it and that they're sending out a check. They also need to make sure that it's received by the tax collector. This is, it's just one of those things that they're going to have to micromanage the heck out of the process of getting the supplemental paid. Okay?
And it is only the first year.
It is only the
Christy
first year,
said before.
unless they pull permits for something else. Like if they put in a pool supplemental bill because they're increasing the value of their property. So anytime they pull permits, that it can trigger this kind of thing. So that a lot of people are like, forget this, I'm just going to save for my supplemental bill because I don't want to be micromanaging this process. And so it sometimes you just have to weigh out how much of a pain in the butt it is. So
and it varies in time because we don't know how long it's going to take for the county to decide, oh yeah, there was a transfer on this property and there's a new tax amount, because that's a trigger for them that they can charge higher taxes, but they don't have a time frame that they're held to on issuing that amount. So that's why you could see someone getting a supplemental bill 6 weeks after close of escrow or 6 months after close of escrow, because it's just whenever the county gets around to reassessing and doing the math and mailing out that supplemental bill. So if for any reason you're ever working with investors who are rehabbing a property and reselling it, they can even get a supplemental bill after the fact for the time period that they owned the house. And so if they call you saying, hey, why didn't escrow take care of this? It's because the county had not yet done their assessment, but eventually it's going to come. So just
everybody gets a supplemental. I mean, it was a little dicey for a while there when we had the values of homes go down, but I don't know if we're going to see that happen again anytime real soon. So
probably not.
No.
All right. Any last questions?
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Christy, for doing an amazing job and getting back in the saddle on teaching these classes. So we appreciate you guys taking the time out to learn from us today. And of course, if you have any additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out to any Chicago title people, and we're here to help. And we look forward to seeing you on our next class. As I mentioned at the start, we will have this recording sent out to everyone who registered, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel. So thanks and have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.
See you, everybody. Go Dogs.
Thank you.